Today we're going to be learning how to draw Bohr diagrams, but first we need to know a couple of things before starting. First of all, let's start with atomic structures. We need to know that all atoms have a nucleus that contains protons and neutrons. Protons having a positive charge while neutrons have no charge. Electrons are contained in shells that surround the nucleus and have a negative charge. Today we're only going to be focusing on neutral atoms. Neutral atoms are those that contain the same number of protons as electrons. Okay, so let's learn how to identify components of an element in the periodic table. We are looking at the element helium. So the symbol for helium is He, and you can always find that on the periodic table. The number up here is called the atomic number, and it determines the number of protons the element has. So since it's 2, we write down a 2 for protons. Since we're talking about neutral atoms, we had said that neutral atoms have the same number of protons as electrons. So we would write down a 2 as well for electrons. Now, to determine the number of neutrons, we go ahead and look at the atomic mass. We have to round 4.003 to the nearest whole number. So we will round this number to 4. So now, to find the number of neutrons, we need to subtract the atomic number from the atomic mass. So the atomic mass is 4, and we subtract the atomic number, which is 2, and it gives us our neutrons, which is 2. Here's just an example of how a helium atom looks. 2 protons and 2 neutrons in the nucleus, and 2 electrons on the shell surrounding the nucleus. Now let's look at electron shells. Each electron shell can only hold a certain number of electrons. Let's look at the chart right here. What this chart is trying to say is that the first shell can only hold 2 electrons. On the second and third, it can only hold 8 electrons. On the fourth and fifth shell, it can only hold 18 electrons. And on the sixth and seventh shell, it could hold 32 electrons. Okay, let's go on to valence electrons. Okay, we're using boron as an example. By looking at the periodic table, we can see that boron's atomic number is 5. So that's the number of protons and electrons it has. We see that it has an atomic mass that is 10.811. So we round it to the nearest whole number, which is 11. We now subtract the atomic number from the atomic mass, and it gives us our neutrons. So let's go ahead and look over here. Our atomic number is 5, so that equals to 5 protons and 5 electrons. 5 protons and 5 electrons. The atomic mass is 10.811, and it's rounded to 11. And in order to find the number of neutrons, we need to subtract the atomic number from the atomic mass, which is 11 minus 5, and it gives us 6 neutrons. When we have the model set up like this, we can identify the valence electrons and the valence shell. So the electrons on the outermost electron shell are called valence electrons. So these electrons on this last shell are called valence electrons. So now, the shell containing electrons that is furthest from the nucleus is called a valence shell. So the shell that holds the valence electrons is called the valence shell. Now, the number of electron shells is the same as the period number. So we look here, these rows that go horizontal determines the number of shells the atom has. So for example here, on period 1, these elements that are on period 1 only have one shell. These elements here that are on period 2 have 2 shells. These elements here that are on the third period, have 3 shells, and so on. Okay, so now let's start with Bohr diagrams. Okay, so we're going to be using carbon as an example. So we start by writing the element symbol on the center. Carbon's symbol is just a C. Carbon is in the second period, as we could see right here on the periodic table. So it has 2 electron shells. So now we draw the 2 electron shells around the nucleus. 1, 2. On Bohr models, we only add the electrons. So right here we see that our atomic number for carbon is 6, and we had said that the number of protons and electrons in a neutral element or atom they're equal. So if we have 6 protons, then we have 6 electrons as well. So we need to add 6 electrons to the Bohr model. As we see on the table, the first shell can only hold 2 electrons. So we add those into the first shell. 1, 2. Okay, so since we already have 2 electrons already drawn, we need to add the other 4. So we are going to add those 4 to the next shell, and we're going to add them one by one, starting from the right side and going counterclockwise. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now check your work. You should have 6 total electrons for carbon. Only 2 electrons can fit in the first shell, and in the second shell we can hold up to 8 electrons, but in this case we only have 4 since our atomic number is 6. So now to find the number of neutrons, we take the atomic mass, which is 12.011, which we round to 12, and then we subtract the atomic number, which is 6. So that leaves us with 6 neutrons. And that's it for Bohr diagrams. You should know how to draw a Bohr diagram for the first 20 elements.